There's this great story that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 15. And to really understand the story, you have to understand who he's telling it to. You see, Jesus, as he often did, was talking to the sinners and tax collectors, the outskirts of society, the least and the lost. And he's speaking to these people. He's teaching them, and they're learning from him. And while Jesus, the rabbi, is doing this, there's this other group of people who are watching what's going on, the Pharisees. And we all know about the Pharisees. And so Jesus begins to tell 3 stories. And the last story that Jesus tells is about a father and 2 sons. And it's such an interesting story. It starts out that the younger son goes to his dad and says, "Dad, I want my inheritance." And you gotta understand, in this time, that would have been a terrible thing to say to your father. Even now, it's not great. And so this son, he goes to his dad and he says, basically, I want you dead. I would rather have your money than you. And it doesn't say it in our text, but I bet both groups that Jesus was speaking to, I bet they gasped. This just didn't happen. Sons just didn't say this to their fathers. Amazingly, the father gives this kid the money. He gives him his inheritance. And the father knows it's a bad idea. Everybody knows this is a bad idea. And yet he does it. The father gives this kid the choice for how to live his life. And so this younger son, he takes off. He goes to a foreign country. He's gone and he begins to live the life. He's spending money, wild times, has friends and all kinds of things. And he wastes all of his money. He squanders it. And he is at this low point in his life. He's broke. He has no options. And at this low point, the very lowest point, he's a pig farmer. Now, for a Jewish boy to be feeding pigs is beyond low. They were unclean animals. This was the most degrading thing that he could do. But he's at this choice. And he begins to talk to himself and he says, I would be better off being my father's servant than living life how I have done. He's got this choice. He can stay where he is, or he can humble himself and go. And you have to understand a little background here, that this boy, that if he went back to his people, he knew he would face something called a kazaza ceremony. And the Talmud speaks about this ceremony, where when a young person would go off to a foreign country and waste money and do what this boy did, when he came back, that his people would get this pot, and they would all circle him, and they would get nuts, and they would break him in front of his face, and they would go, so-and-so has broken his bond with his people, and they would throw the nuts in. It was this ceremony to let this young person know that they had done wrong, that they had betrayed their people, and they would come in as a second-class citizen. And he's at this point in his life where does he do that? Does he continue to stay where he's at? Or does he face this ceremony, this degrading time? Does he become his father's servant? And he does. He embarks on this journey back to his father. He goes back to his homeland. He travels there, and to his utter shock, his father is waiting on him. His father doesn't make him a servant. His father says, I want you to be my son again. He embraces him. The father is always waiting, always wanting the son to come back. Jesus isn't done with the story yet, though. We like to think that's the end. The younger brother comes home, the father throws a party, and isn't everything great? But it's not. The older son comes into the picture. And the older son goes to his father and says, Dad, what are you doing? This son of yours, notice he doesn't say my brother, this son of yours goes off, he squanders the money, he dishonors himself, and you throw a party? You didn't throw a party for me. And the father goes back to his son and says, son, he came back. Your brother, he came back. We need to celebrate this. Isn't this wonderful? He's telling his son, the older son, you need to change your heart. And then the older son says, I don't know. I can't tell you. Jesus ends the story right there as a cliffhanger. We don't know how the older son reacted. We don't know if the younger son cleaned up his act. We have no idea. And you see, we take these 2 characters, this older brother and this younger brother, and we tend to find ourselves in each. And we like to say, well, maybe you're like the younger son who had external problems. He went off and he did all these wrong things, and he did this and he did that, and he had to change his life, go on this journey back to his father, reconnect with the father. Or maybe you're like the older son, and you've done all the right things. Maybe you've said all the right things, and you look okay on the outside, but on the inside, your heart needs change. There's decay. And maybe you need to make your heart right. You need to reconnect with the Father's heart. And maybe that's your journey. And we see these two characters and we try to say, which one are you? But I want to submit to you what Henry Nouwen said. He was an author, and he said that in this story, the goal that Jesus is trying to get across to these two groups, to the sinners and to the Pharisees, is this. Don't be like either one of the sons. Be like the Father. That's Jesus' point here, to be like the Father. That character in the story is the perfect example for us. You want to know the secret to all of this connect stuff, of connecting to God on this journey that we call life? The key is to walk day in and day out as God would, to follow the Father's example. It's easy being a child. We like to say that we're the ones who are forgiven, and that's nice, but instead of just being the one who is forgiven, we need to forgive others. Instead of just being the one who is welcomed home, we need to welcome others home. Instead of just being the one who is shown compassion, we need to show others compassion. The key to following God, the key to connecting God, is to walk like He does.
And they're having a Passover meal to celebrate the fact that God is saving them and that God is sparing them from the last plague there in Egypt. And, oh my gosh.